Hello, my name is Tony, and this time around, I'm going to be revisiting another key movie from my tragically misspent youth, the sub-Bond action thriller When 8 Bells Toll. Previously, in the Dracula AD 1972 video, I covered the place where I grew up in the early 70s and my favourite pastime. The place was a South Wales Valleys town called Bryn Mawr, and my favourite pastime was hanging out at the local cinema, the Market Hall. It was sure I learned all about life, death, violence and sex, but that's enough about Bryn Mawr on a Saturday night. At the Market Hall I watched some of the most inappropriate movies for someone of my tender age. It was sure I learned that a black dude called Richard Roundtree was probably the coolest man on the planet.
My name is John Shaft. Freeze.
At this point I had not actually seen a real black person in the flesh. Yep. Valley's life was that insular. I learned that Swedish stewardesses would drop their knickers, whip off their tops and copulate almost anywhere in an instant. That window cleaners got to shag lots of women, more than milkmen even. That the Chinese will kick your ass. I made a mental note to be especially polite to the staff at the one and only local takeaway. I had at least seen a real Chinese person in the flesh, behind a counter serving plum duck and egg fried rice in brown paper bags. I learned that there were other uses for butter than just spreading it on your toast, and that James Bond wasn't the only naval commander allowed a free rein to blow things up and blow people away. Oh no, there was another one called Philip Calvert, and I liked him almost as much as I liked Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, only Commander Calvert appeared in just one film, which is a goddamn shame, I reckon. Brief recap. The Market Hall was a flea pit that was cheap to access, and they let you in to see movies you really shouldn't have been let in to see. I went there a lot. Parenting in the 70s equated to encouraging you to smoke, drink and generally keep out of the way, so that was alright. The big movies always took a while to do the circuit, and there were a lot of films that screened with almost relentless regularity. They were either the older or less successful ones. We got Zulu, Where Eagles Dare, 60s Bond movies and many obscure horror flicks, and they were regular recycles, so I watched stuff repeatedly. When 8 Bells Toll was one that turned up at regular intervals from around 1972 until 74, and so began my obsession with it. And there's a good reason for this obsession. It was fucking great, and as usual, irrespective of whether you want to know or not, I'm going to tell you why it was so fucking great, and you're going to listen. Or if you're not, you can sod off now. I should care. Did I mention that my upbringing also encouraged intolerance? Alistair Stewart MacLean was an immensely popular novelist and screenwriter. Most of his books became films, and most of his screenplays, like Where Eagles Dare for instance, became books. He wrote action thrillers, and for the most part, he was bloody good at it. When Sean Connery relinquished his role as James Bond, producer Elliot Kastner thought it an opportune moment to bandwagon jump and kickstart a new action spy thriller movie franchise. Having produced Where Eagles Dare, he decided to capitalise on his relationship with MacLean and envisioned a series featuring Naval Commander Philip Calvert of MacLean's 1966 novel When 8 Bells Toll. He felt Calvert to be a more than likely Bond replacement. Calvert was a rougher, more down-to-earth character than Ian Fleming's creation. Quite happy to beat people up, shoot people up, and blow things up. No problem getting his hands dirty and equally at home on dry land, in a boat, or under the water in scuba gear. He could also pull the babes. Most girls love a fearless diver, I'm told. Now, when I went to see the film, I was unaware it was considered a box office flop, the 11th most popular movie at the British box office in its year of release. I suppose the fact it arrived at the Market Hall relatively quickly should have given me a clue, a reliable yardstick by which to gauge that here was a movie that wasn't exactly setting the world on fire. So what was the shape of the UK box office in 1971, and what does that tell us about the British cinema-going public and their tastes back then? Well, it looked like this. The Aristocats, a feature-length Disney animation kids film, snagged the top spot for that year. On the Buses, the film version of a British TV sitcom known for its smutty sexual innuendo and double entendres in which ugly middle-aged men leer and lust after much younger and far more attractive women and very often get off with them. Third, and by extreme contrast, is Ralph Nelson's bloody and controversial revisionist western Soldier Blue. Fourth, we have a Carry On film, a series known for its smutty sexual innuendo and double entendres in which ugly middle-aged men leer and lust after much younger and far more attractive women and very often get off with them. Some of the women are also middle-aged here, but not as ugly as the men. In 5th place is Dad's Army, the film version of a classic British TV sitcom set during World War II, in which a group of men, either too old or too stupid or cowardly to fight in a war, form a branch of the Home Guard and get into scrapes and trouble in a seaside town. Next, at 6th, the best film on the list, a peerless and rock-hard slice of British gangster noir, and a true classic of the genre. Get Carter is an exercise in pulp cinema poetry, and features what is probably Michael Caine's defining screen performance. Brilliant, relentless, cruel, exhilarating, and bristling with downbeat realism and stylistic genius. Could be my all-time favourite British film. Numero 7 is a sex comedy, There's a Girl in My Soup, starring Peter Sellers. Not one of his best, but nowhere near as bad as some of his worst. 8. Percy is a sex comedy about a penis transplant which manages to succeed at being neither sexy or funny. A dick with a life of its own is a bit too proximate to reality for most men. At 9, we have The Railway Children, the second of 2 kids' flicks on the list. At 10 is Up Pompeii, the film version of a British TV sitcom known for its smutty sexual innuendo and double entendres, in which ugly middle-aged men leer and lust after much younger and far more attractive women, and very often get off with them. This one has Frankie Howerd as Lurcio, a slave in ancient Rome. And at 11 is the second best film on the list next to Get Carter, yes, When 8 Bells Toll. I'd rank Soldier Blue in 3rd place, but as for the rest, it doesn't really matter where they fall. Looking at this collection, I realised, believe it or not, I saw each and every one of these movies in the Market Hall cinema. Yep, I would literally go and see anything, whatever was showing. It's only now, however, that I feel compelled to consider what this says about British cinema goers in the year of 71. Sex comedies were popular, TV to big screen translations were popular, smutty sexual innuendo and double entendres were popular, and the concept of ugly middle-aged men being able to verbally abuse proposition and then get to shag gorgeous younger women had some significant appeal for some people. Mostly ugly middle-aged men, I imagine. I can't imagine what women got out of these films, but I have to assume there were some in the audience. When people say it was a different world back then, maybe this gives the uninformed something of a glimmer of what they mean. Back to When 8 Bells Toll. When I first saw it at the age of 11 or 12, I thought it was fantastic. Loud, fast-moving, violent, action-packed with a rousing score and a terrific central performance in the lead, a then little-known screen actor by the name of Anthony Hopkins. Yep, the future Hannibal Lecter in his first real high-profile leading role. And he is quite excellent. Confident, aggressive, and softly spoken in a clipped way, always ready with a cynical quip, a bullet, a hand grenade, a crossbow, and a punch or kick to the chops. One critic commented that he played Calvert in a way that made James Bond look like a lounge lizard. It's certainly a physically demanding role, and one that this Shakespearean stage actor seemed to excel at. He really looks like he's having fun with it. So what's it all about? Here's the plot. Spoilers ahead. British gold bullion transport ships are disappearing in the Irish Sea. The British Treasury suspects piracy, Jim lad, but are clueless as to what is going on, as the crew of the ships disappears along with their vessels. There are no witnesses. Whitehall Mandarin Uncle Arthur, Robert Morley, decides to engage the services of Naval Commander and ace frogman Philip Calvert and dispatches him to the coast of Scotland undercover as a marine biologist to investigate. He is accompanied by an intelligence agent called Hunslet, who is to support his investigation. Hunslet is played by Old Vic stalwart Corin Redgrave and is functionally useless in the field. He can make cups of tea and ruin beans on toast. Not to worry, he'll soon be dead. Calvert and Hunslet moor at sea near the coastal town of Torbay, where Greek tycoon Sir Anthony Skouras, played by Jack Hawkins, lip-syncing to Charles Gray, is also moored in his yacht, with a bunch of henchmen, led by Lavorsky, Ferdy Main, and his much younger, unfeasibly pretty, and clearly unhappy, pouting, sexpot French wife, Charlotte, Nathalie Delong. Ultimately, Calvert suspects Skouras and his gang of being up to no good. The Torbay locals and the local police are a tight-lipped and unhelpful bunch who don't like strangers poking about in their business. There's a local laird who lives in a local castle, and he's also a bit of a shifty fucker. Seems the bullion ships are being hijacked by a criminal gang, sailed to Torbay, scuttled, and the bullion retrieved by divers in deep-sea diving suits. Skouras and his gang are most likely the culprits. In the end, the local rough and ready fishermen rally around Calvert to storm the castle, free the prisoners, and slaughter the hapless culprits with machine guns, whaling harpoons, and explosives. Skouras turns out to be innocent, a great relief to Uncle Arthur, as he is a member of his gentleman's club. He was being coerced into cooperating with the pirates who had kidnapped his real wife. Charlotte was a stand-in cahoots with the baddies. Simple rule, you can't trust foreign skirt in these types of films. They're always wrong uns. As Calvert has already shagged her, he decides to give her a head start and lets her escape with a bar of gold in a small dinghy. He's not going to go with her. She tells him he's a professional bastard.
You're just a professional bastard.
He tells her,
In the words of a late friend of mine,
what I do well.
The film ends with a zoom shot of Calvert as he walks away, and the great theme tune kicks in. First off, the plot makes little sense. Did I say little sense? I mean no sense. What the hell are gold bullion ships doing sailing aimlessly around the Irish Sea? How come 5 go missing before anyone does anything? Now I know that sinking them is to hide them from view, but surely it would make more sense to unload the gold, then sink them to hide them from view. The gang have the locals and the police and the laird in their thrall anyway. Kidnapped relatives and crew members are being held in the castle as collateral to keep everyone cooperative. So what if they see the ships before they sink them? What does it matter? They're not going to risk Granny, Sonny or Wifey getting a serrated blade to the windpipe. Although, I suppose some might risk it. I'd be tempted with certain family members for sure. But forget the plot. The deal here is to enjoy the action, suspense and pyrotechnics, the death and mayhem, the moments of comedy, especially Morley's indignation that someone on the wine committee of his club is a suspect in all the skullduggery.
Sir Anthony is one of the most distinguished members of my own club. He's on the wine committee.
And is being thrust into the field with Calvert. Is bemoaning the absence of proper biscuits.
Don't you any proper biscuits?
Beg your pardon, sir?
Proper biscuits, the ones with the cream inside.
He means custard creams. And that a seriously wounded heavy is making a mess by bleeding on the carpet.
Take him ashore, hand him over to the police.
I think I should. He's making a terrible mess of the carpet.
Best is his shocked horror at Calvert dispensing violent justice for the murder of Hunslet.
Good Lord, you can't go around acting like a one-man execution squad. This is England.
So what else recommends this undervalued gem? Much of the rugged and wild scenery is simply breathtaking to look at, especially the aerial sequences. The underwater scenes are realistically shot and choreographed. Although some critics really hated the score, I loved it to bits. I can't understand. Trust me, it is good stuff. Hopkins gives a stellar performance as Calvert. Nathalie Delon is gorgeous in a wooden pallid French mannequin sort of way. The stunts are well executed, and the action sequences are dynamic and quite brutal. I suppose the violence isn't that graphic, which probably bagged it an A certificate, but some of it is quite nasty for the time. Calvert is more than happy to ram a dinghy and gratuitously shoot the floundering survivors in the water, then blow up the dinghy. He says it's in revenge for Hunslet's murder, but I get the feeling that he'd have done it if Hunslet was still alive, for shits and giggles. And Uncle Arthur merrily boots shut a deck hatch on the neck and thus throat of a heavy, hence his bleeding messily on the carpet. Sure, it's a Bond wannabe. The influences and nods to Fleming are clear, yet it has a more rough-edged aesthetic, a more grounded feel. When 2 thugs attack Calvert, you expect him to prevail with relative ease, but he doesn't really get the better of them, subverting audience expectations. Now Bond would have battered the bejesus out of the brawling boobies, beating their brains to buggery into the bargain. That's harder to say than you'd think. So there are definite stylistic differences and an abrasive, more human element that sets it apart from the bigger budgeted Bond bandwagon, an altogether slicker and more fantasy-orientated endeavour. Hopkins, although well-spoken here and a smooth operator, comes across as a bit more of a roughneck than Bond. Somehow more working-class thug than upper-middle-class hero. Not the sort of character you could picture being at home in a high-stakes casino in Monaco, tuxedoed up to the nines and sipping a chilled cocktail. More suited to downing double whiskies and pints of Guinness in a pub bar wearing a fisherman's sweater and denim jeans. And the film uses a trope I extol the virtue of in another previous video about another McLean penned slice of genius, Where Eagles Dare. It kicks off with a mission already in play. Calvert sneaking aboard a deserted bullion ship in the dead of night in scuba gear. There is a brief period of exposition in flashback to set up the plot, then is up and away and gets on with the job. It's a smart framework for action movies, where the focus is on the thrills and spills rather than bothersome spoon-feeding of background information. Whereas most Bond knockoffs are either more serious and dramatic spy operas or frivolous, trashy, garish, pseudo-comedic, second-rate impersonations, where 8 Bells Toll falls somewhere in the middle ground, and is all the better for it. Should they have made more? Would have been nice, but money talks loudly, and when 8 Bells Toll represented a financial whisper. Plus, Connery made a return for Diamonds Are Forever, and the Bond movies were very much back on the map. So instead, what we've got is a standalone adventure for Commander Philip Calvert. Taking his initials into account, here's hoping that Hollywood doesn't consider a remake with a character reimagined as a lesbian feminist woman of colour battling patriarchal villains who are scuttling freighters of vegan burgers off the coast of Somalia. It's best left alone just the way it is. The 8th bell has tolled and should remain respectfully silent. Thank you for listening, it's been a pleasure. If you have elicited some minor enjoyment from this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Here's a song called Everything's Gone South. Ain't that the truth, Betty?
You're just a professional bastard. 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 Bastard.
The best years of my life don't amount to a hill of beans. Lonely walks on the same tree-lined street. Sitting in the cabbage leaf dark before a movie screen. Theatre more than half empty, always the cheap seats. You gotta see the swinging stewardesses, the easy way they strip out of their dresses. A man to respect is one you gotta see, oh it's a B-movie act job just like me. Didn't seem so bad then, it doesn't seem so bad now. I know what you're going to say before you open your mouth. The good guys and the bad men, why does it feel so sad now? Everything but everything's gone south. The downbeat latter days firmly held in the most contempt. Colder nights by an old two-bar grill. Now voyeur of the cosmetic lies as I remain exempt. Mud and dressed as lamb, media landfill. Repeatedly the Zulu hordes advancing, with primal chants and their-ass dancing. When 8 bells toll resonates for me, and the way that I'm still living all at sea. Didn't seem so bad then, it doesn't seem so bad now. I know what you're going to say before you open your mouth. The good guys and the bad men, why does it feel so sad now? Everything but everything's gone south. Silent stare on a hard plastic chair, suppress the worries, woes and cares. If I was the only lonely soul in there, it's not like I was going anywhere. It didn't seem so bad then, it doesn't seem so bad now. I know what you're going to say before you open your mouth. The good guys and the bad men, why does it feel so sad now? Now everything but everything's gone south.
The words of a late friend of mine, it's what I do well.